It began with a bullet. But it wasn't just the bullet that killed an archduke. It was the fuse that lit a continent on fire. Before the trenches, before the gas masks, before the world fell into chaos, Europe was a boiling cauldron of pride, power, and paranoia. And when that pot finally boiled over, it would change the world forever. This isn't just a history lesson, this is the story of how an entire world sleepwalked into disaster. This is the true story of how World War I began. Europe was proud, too proud. Every nation thought it was destined for greatness, and every nation feared the others felt the same. In France, defeat in the Franco-Prussian War still stung. The provinces of Alsace and Lorraine had been taken by Germany, and generations grew up dreaming of revenge. In Germany, pride swelled with empire and power. It was young, ambitious, and itching to prove itself, militarily and culturally. And in the Balkans, nationalism was like gasoline on a fire. Slavic groups like the Serbs dreamed of freedom and unity, especially at the expense of Austria-Hungary. Secret societies plotted revolution. Nationalism gave people purpose, but it also made compromise feel like betrayal. Europe wasn't just fighting over ideas, it was fighting over the world. The 19th century had been a mad dash to conquer Africa and Asia. Britain built an empire where the sun never set. France claimed vast colonies. But Germany, late to the game, wanted more. And it was ready to challenge whoever stood in its way. In Morocco, Germany tested France and almost sparked war. Twice. In Africa, skirmishes turned into diplomatic showdowns. The result? Deepening rivalries and a growing fear that colonial disputes could trigger a war back home. This wasn't just a race for land, it was a race for power, pride, and survival. The world didn't just stumble into war, it was building toward it. By 1914, militarism wasn't just a policy, it was a way of life. In Germany, military officers had the ear of the Kaiser. In Russia, generals pushed for faster mobilization. Britain and Germany were locked in a naval arms race, pouring fortunes into massive warships. Schools taught that war was noble, newspapers glorified it, and behind closed doors, war plans were drawn, tested, and locked in. When the time came, there would be no pause, only action. And in a militarized world, action meant war. To keep peace, Europe built alliances. But instead of building safety, they built a trap. There were two major camps, the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain. On paper, these alliances were defensive. In reality, they were ticking time bombs. A war between any two nations risked pulling everyone else in. And some treaties were secret, so secret even other governments didn't know what would trigger them. It was like Europe had built a giant web of tripwires. When one snapped, the whole continent would fall. Nowhere was Europe more volatile than the Balkans, a region of passion, pride, and endless blood feuds. In the early 1910s, two brutal wars broke out there. Borders shifted, tensions skyrocketed, and Serbia, small but fiercely nationalistic, emerged more powerful and more dangerous to Austria-Hungary. Austria saw Serbia not just as a rival, but as a threat to its very existence. A rising Slavic nationalism could unravel its empire from the inside. Austria had a problem. Serbia was the match, and soon the match would be struck. June 28, 1914, Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting Bosnia, a region filled with tension. He never should have gone, but he did. That morning, Serbian nationalists from a group called the Black Hand were waiting. After a failed bomb attempt, the Archduke's car took a wrong turn, right into the path of 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. 2 shots, 1 assassin, and the world changed forever. But no one expected what came next. Not war, not yet. The assassination was just the beginning. What followed was a month of threats, ultimatums, and terrible decisions. The July crisis. Austria blamed Serbia, and issued an impossible ultimatum. Serbia agreed to most of it, but not all. Backed by Germany's so-called blank check, Austria declared war. Russia, protecting Serbia, began to mobilize. Germany responded by declaring war on Russia, then on France. To reach France, Germany invaded neutral Belgium, forcing Britain into the war. In just 31 days, a regional crisis became a global catastrophe. No one planned it, but no one could stop it. World War I didn't start because one man died. It started because of everything that came before. Nationalism that made nations blind, imperialism that made them greedy, militarism that made them reckless, alliances that made them trapped. The assassination was the spark, but the fire had been building for years. By the end of the war, over 20 million were dead. 4 empires collapsed. The world would never be the same, and the seeds of World War II were already in the soil. So next time someone says a war just happened, remember 1914. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. If this moment in history left you thinking, don't stop here. Subscribe for part 2, where we follow the first shots, the first blood, and the descent into war like the world had never seen. This was the beginning. Now see what came next.